Alice was too old to play with dolls and too young to make love. Brooke Shields, as you've never seen her before. She was too beautiful to play with boys and too young to play with men. So Alice began to play with death.
She's made repeated requests that the kid see a psychiatrist.
She has a knack of making things look like accidents.
It's dead! It's dead! He tried to kill me!
No more dolls, no more toys. Alice only plays with bodies. It's too late to save her. A story of unnatural love and unnatural death.
All right, hello and welcome to another edition of Drive-In Double Feature. I'm Ryan.
I'm Nathan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about two movies every week, every Tuesday and Thursday. And today we are talking about 1976's Alice, Sweet Alice, directed by Alfred Soule. This is our first slasher movie I believe we've talked about on this podcast.
Really? That's surprising. I feel like that should be our bread and butter. But
I know.
Cool.
How did we get this far without talking about one of those?
Right? We it took us 20 episodes in. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, slasher movies are some of my favorite movies, so I'm really happy that we finally got to one.
Well, then I think that's a really appropriate question. Then, what's one of your favorite Brooke Shields movies?
Oh God! Oh no! Now you're over here. I was prepared. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, Nathan, how could you forget Blue Lagoon?
Yeah, I know Blue Lagoon.
No,
Brady Baby.
Oh, of course. No, Nathan, I will go with the predictable question and say, what is your... I was just trying to keep you on your toes.
Thank you.
You always are trying to get me on my toes. I was trying to get you this week.
And you did. You sure did.
What are some of your favorite slasher movies?
Well, one of my all-time favorite movies is Halloween. I know I think it's an essential movie all the way around. It's just really good. Probably one of the perfect horror movies. I just think it has the scares, it has the thrills, and it's just all there. It's great, and Michael is just so scary. Nightmare on Elm Street is probably my first foray into slasher movies. I watched that when I was really young, so that got me into horror. So I really loved the first one. And the Scream movies, which I just watched all of those. The first Scream? Oh my God, it's so good. I'm like, I forgot. Every time I watch that, I forget how good that movie is. Because it's not only meta, but it actually has good scares as well. It's like a really good mix.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's some really good ones in there. I mean, like Scream, like you said. I guess you could say Nightmare on Elm Street, the Freddy, Jason movies. Just were the ones where it's like unsuspecting teenagers just getting hacked to bits. I mean, it's all really good stuff. Oh, a really good slasher movie that you and I know we both like is The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Yeah, which I did a review of that over on the YouTube Media Boys channel. Well, that movie's really weird, right? I think that'd be a good one to cover later because like it's a mix of like true crime narration with a slasher movie. It's an odd one.
Yep, and we also get Don Wells of Gilligan's Island fame in that movie. But
yes, we do. Have you ever seen Peeping Tom, which is like considered the first slasher?
I have.
Yeah, I have too. It's a good movie. I actually really like that one. I think it's one that's worth checking out.
It's worth checking out. It's been a long time. Maybe one we'll talk about at some point. But getting into this movie right here, My kind of experience with it, like the reason why I picked it is, I mean, we've mentioned it before, but this was on James Rolfe's Monster Madness one year, where he features 31 different horror movies to talk about, and he mentioned this one. And I remember, because he shows little brief clips of this movie, and I remember just seeing like the killer. They had this glamorized face mask with that yellow rain jacket looking thing, and I just remember thinking that was so interesting. And this podcast kind of gave me like that push to finally watch that movie.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked it. Yeah, same here. I knew about this movie from Monster Madness. Had never watched it, but something about like that mask. It's like a really freaky see-through like doll mask that really like it stays with you. The idea of like a little child killer as well. I don't know. There's some kind of draw to it, and also the fact that it's very early slasher. Like it's before Halloween. Like this is like more giallo Italian inspired than American slasher inspired.
That's what I felt like too. I mean, even though it is an American production, it really does feel like an Italian giallo movie, and I think that has to do with the heavy Roman Catholicism symbolism in the movie. It really does feel like it's set in this like really rich history, but there's a lot of symbolism in this movie.
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, it is quite heavy with its religious themes for sure. Well, I guess I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to have so many such a religious theme to it. I guess I just never knew that about the movie. But heck, the first title of this movie was First Communion. So, like, they were even playing into that really heavily from the start. And not
one alien appears.
I know, right? I can't wait for that crossover one day. We'll see. Hopefully the star of this is still alive. Christopher Walken's still kicking. So,
yep.
But, yeah, it's definitely, if you're into religious scare movies, it's for you. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like the brief like rundown of this movie is just kind of like there's these two twin girls, or not twins, but there's these girls with similar ages, and they're sisters, and they have a single mother, and one girl is she's a total brat, like a shithead. Like she's just a terrible child and just does terrible things to her sister. And then one day her sister gets brutally murdered, then like in a really gruesome way where she gets choked, thrown into a box, and then set on fire.
And then burned. I was really confused at first because like literally how that death is shown, they open up the altar and smoke just like billows out of it. And I was like, what the hell is going on in there? Oh, she was just burnt. I thought at first I was like, is there supernatural stuff in this movie? Which is no, there is not.
No, and there was really weird like reaction shots in that one as well. And there's like one where the little girl's being like dragged, like after she gets choked out, she gets dragged, and then there's like bits where like this nun is like kind of reacting, and I thought like the nun was in the same room like watching this dead girl being dragged, but she just stood there, and then like in the next scene the nun runs into the room. So I'm like, wait, so they were just showing close-ups of a nun that didn't know what was going on? I
think the first 15 minutes of this movie are really poorly edited. I actually thought at one point, is the Tubi version a TV edited version? Because it had like fade to black in the middle of a scene, like it went cut to commercials and stuff. But no, I looked it up. It's just the way this movie is. It's the first little bit just kind of is a little sloppy, and then it gets better from there. Not to say like it's bad. I think the introduction's good with the little girl and Brooke Shields like bickering the whole time. Brooke Shields is the one that dies. She was very unknown then. Otherwise, she probably would have starred. No, I mean it has a tenseness to it because you're in the church the whole time. You don't know what's going on, and they're all taking their first communion, Brooke Shields' first communion, and it's like a build up to like where is Brooke Shields?
Yeah, and everyone. I mean, it's a really tense movie for the most part, and I really wasn't bored like throughout any point of it. But you know, that's kind of where the movie picks up, though, is like when they find that she's dead, immediately everybody thinks it's Alice is the killer, the older sister, because she's such a terrible child that Can you imagine though, like you're everybody thinks so poorly of you that they think a little 12-year-old girl is immediately murdering her sister. Like, oh yeah, that's totally something she would do.
But here's the thing: is me personally as the audience, I was agreeing with them. I was like, oh yeah, it's her. Yeah, she did it. I thought it was weird because it was a giallo movie, which is like really all about murder mystery. And I was like, oh, but we know it's her the whole time. That's a little funky. And then it makes you start to question if it is actually her. And I really like that about it. It makes you question your own like perceived like it's her kind of deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, because when they do show the killer is kind of shown from this perspective of like you don't really know the killer's true height, because obviously everyone thinks it's a little girl, so it's kind of shot where the killer kind of looks like it might be a little girl like Alice. So because there's other red herrings too, where they think it's maybe possibly like the friend, like Alice's friend, or like the little girl's friend that is the killer, maybe, which is a jump too, but they kind of mentioned that. When they finally do reveal the killer, I was a little confused. I was just kind of like, huh? Like,
I honestly might have forgotten who that character was. I was like, I had to like go through my head and be like, oh, okay, it's her. Gotcha.
Which we're going to get into spoilers, I think.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
So the main killer turns out to be, well, the family is like family friends with the priest, the father of the Catholic church that they attend. And randomly the killer is the priest's housekeeper. And, and they do kind of like reveal like why she did it, even though it's not the best reasoning. I will be honest, where it's just kind of like, she's like, oh, well, my young daughter died. And so I realized the way to go after others is to take vengeance out on their children. And I guess she kind of had like this like vendetta against the mother because she had premarital sex with a man, and then she got pregnant, and then eventually they divorced. So it's like two like cardinal sins in Catholicism you're not supposed to commit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and she's just like crazy. This lady's acting was like off the wall. I loved it. But she's like pointing knives at people, calling the main mom a whore in the middle of church, stuff like that.
Which I'm glad you brought up the acting. It's not just her. I mean, okay, so I want to say something really positive. This movie, it's not a bad movie. It's not. I mean,
no.
it's, and I think there's lots of really competently made parts to it. And I mean, I like the mystery of it. The mood is fantastic, but oh my God, this is like some really like over the top atrocious acting from a lot of people.
No, and I'll just mirror what you said no matter what I say. I do like this movie. Didn't love it. I liked it. It's not bad, but you're right. This main actress, Paula Shepherd, was 19 when she was playing Alice, which would explain like a lot of the low angles and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is really weird. I mean, they both looked like they were just like tiny children. I mean, they didn't look like anything. They didn't look like they were teenagers, but you know, like you said, Paula was at least almost 20 years old by the time the movie came out. And then Brooke Shields was, I think, a teenager by that point.
Gotcha. So. I mean, they did a good job. Brooke Shields at least looked like a kid. I think Paula looked like a kid for like some of it, but sometimes you'd look at her while she's acting and be like, oh, that's an adult. That's someone that's about to be 20.
Yeah. But to reiterate, like everybody in this movie had some super over the top acting. Like the mother, like she's screaming. Everyone just realized like, okay, I really want to show emotion in this scene. And instead of me acting really super tense, I'm just going to yell all of my lines.
Yeah, I keep thinking about that one scene where the lady gets stabbed in the foot and she gets carried outside in the rain. And she's like, and the mom's just yelling, please, somebody help us. But imagine this like up so many levels, just yelling in the rain, help somebody get us. It's so like over the top.
It's so funny, but I would almost argue, I mean, like it is really bad acting, but it's like, it's entertaining to watch really, because they're not doing these really subdued performances. These are like, I have to really ham this scene up, and because this director is really demanding a lot of emotion out of me.
Exactly, yeah. And I imagine that's what was going on, or they saw the people around them acting. I was like, oh, I got to get on their level. I gotta do what they're doing.
Yeah,
yeah. It's something else. I think maybe one of the best people in this movie is their fat landlord, that who has such a unique look. Just some big dude. He has no eyebrows. And he has a really just high-pitched voice, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I mean, look. I mean, I'm not. They make him look really gross in this movie, and I'm not trying to. And I'm really not trying to be mean, but I mean, like literally, like they put him in like these gross, like stained clothes, and like
it looks like
I don't know.
So.
I was going to say that. Did you notice that there was like a stain like right in the front and the back of his pants? So it literally looked like he pissed and shit himself.
Yeah, like he was just doing it all. Oh, man. Yeah, no, I noticed.
And he's got all these cats, and Karen comes in there. And now this guy's like a total perv too, apparently, because he tries to molest this little 12-year-old girl, which, because, with his voice being that high, I thought he might be a gay character possibly, just because it is a little effeminate, but I don't want to judge. But anyway, he does try to molest her, and it's a really gross scene. And in retaliation, she grabs one of his cats, like the little tiny kitten, and just slams it on the ground.
This is when I was like, well, Alice is like a messed up character, right? I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I can ever root for her actually being innocent after she just slams a cat into the ground.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, just she's almost everybody in this movie is just like a terrible human being.
Yeah, especially like Alice's. I always think of her aunt, how she is constantly accusing this 12-year-old girl of being the killer, and just getting on. Like they're both pretty awful to each other, like equally. They both treat each other like garbage. Alice and her aunt, back and forth.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but. I couldn't feel bad for either one of them, because like the aunt does get stabbed to almost stabbed to death, and then Alice, is accused of being this killer, and I'm like, I don't feel any sympathy for these two characters at all.
No, none at all. Like, because like that's a big plot line, is like that trying to like get better, like trying to get over what had happened, and I was like, I don't care. She's an awful person. Alice ends up going to like I guess
like a mental institution.
Yeah, mental institution, yeah. I did want to talk about this. I think there's this really weird moment. I will say the ending leaves a lot open, because like the ending's very ambiguous in a way. And I think they were trying to set something up with this line, but I hated it, was the lie detector scene. They strap her with the lie detector. And then afterwards, the guy is talking to the other guy. It's like, oh, there's something weird about that Alice. I wrapped the wire around her boobs, and she looked at me like she wanted to fuck me. And I was like, what?
Oh, that was so gross. I remember that now.
And like, I thought then like, oh, the twist is going to be like an orphan thing, like, oh, she's actually like 25 or something. No, that never happens. He just is a creep.
Yeah, they never ever. That guy nothing bad ever happens to him. But,
he never shows up again.
No, but again, like, why are there so many people like wanting to molest this little 12-year-old girl? It's so gross.
It is gross, yeah.
But the only explanation though as to why Alice is kind of like acting out in this way, where she does acting like a terrible child. I mean, it's kind of hinted at. I don't know if you picked it up, but her mother obviously favors Alice over Karen.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
or the other way around. She favors Karen over Alice.
Yeah, and you can tell that from the very beginning, is like because she like doesn't like too like mean, but like put like kind of goes at her sister, hides her behind a door in like a warehouse and stuff. You can just tell Alice is just very jealous of the relationship that her sister and her mom have. And I'm guessing that's because she was born outside of marriage, or, she was conceived outside of marriage.
Right. And like when Karen's dress shows up, like for communion, Alice kind of takes the veil and she puts it on. She's not really doing anything like malicious with it yet. She's just trying it on, looking in the mirror, and then like her mother and her just like immediately get on her, being like, Alice, take that off right now. Like, she's not doing anything, and then she just slams it down.
Mm-hmm. And it's just pretty much like, you don't love me as much as Karen, you know, like a lot of that talk. Even more to set up that she actually killed Karen.
Yeah,
Is that what it's setting up? Because, okay, in the very last shot, right, the old lady, the housekeeper, she does get caught. She kills the father, like, in the middle of the church, which is a wild scene.
I love that scene, because I was not expecting that at all. And then just immediately just stabs him right in the throat, like in the middle of church. It's so crazy. Yeah,
I agree. I think the ending of this really, like, amps it up just the amount it needs to be. But after that, Alice gets a knife and she looks at it, and the music starts to play, and it's trying to hint at something, that something is wrong with Alice. But the movie ends. It doesn't really go into much else. And I'm wondering if it hinting that some of those murders were actually Alice. I'm not too sure.
I didn't know if that's what it was hinting at personally. I just kind of, to me, it was kind of like, oh, well, I'll pick up the mantle now. Now I'm the killer. But it could have been maybe like that. But
who knows?
I think personally it was her that did it. I mean, I think it was the housekeeper doing all the killings personally.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if you read anything about like the making of this movie at all. Like, there was
a little bit.
Did you? Okay, so apparently, I mean, so again, these are all just on independent researchers, so I don't know how true these are. I didn't dig that deep, but so the landlord guy, the big guy in the movie, the main director, like, said he found him like at a graveyard impersonating a priest.
What?
And like, that's how he was discovered. And if you look, I mean, this guy doesn't really have any other acting credits. So I wonder if they literally just found like a guy off the street and they're like, do you want to be?
Oh, I did read about this guy. Well, I read about how he died. Do you know how he died? He only died a few years after this movie was made, and he actually was going to get some roles in some, like, you know, low budget horror movies. But I guess he got caught in a turnstile in the New York subway because he was so big he couldn't fit through, and he killed himself because it was just so devastating, because it was in the newspaper. The New York Times rushed it with a picture and everything, and the director said he was heartbroken because I guess the Alfred Soul and him were actually really good friends or something. Really sad story.
I thought you were going to say like he killed himself with the turnstile.
No, that would just be a wacky, like, you know, 1001 Ways to Die.
No, and I totally, I mean, I get that. I mean, that would be pretty humiliating. So it is understandable, but and then there's other stuff too, like the director, like he was kind of like a newbie and he really didn't know like how to get certain people to appear in this movie. So he would wait outside of Broadway shows. And like when what they would get over with, he would just go up to random actors and ask them if they wanted to be in his movie.
No, he didn't even do like casting calls. He was just like, I'm walking up to people, getting them in my movie. Wild.
Right. And he discovered Brooke Shields by discovering her in a Vogue magazine ad, I guess.
Interesting. And look at that. She became one of the biggest stars, or recognizable ones.
Paula Shepherd, he discovered from dancing, like she was like a ballerina, or like she was into ballet, which kind of explains like her smaller frame.
That would make sense, yeah.
And then there was some other really weird credits in here. So I'm a wrestling fan. I like wrestling. And I noticed that at one of the very last credits was Antonio Roca. And he used to wrestle for the WWF like back in the 60s. And it said I looked on IMDb. This is his only acting credit. And he was the funeral director. And he's in the scene that he's in, and they decided to credit him for this movie. He's in a blink and you'll miss him scene where he takes Karen's casket and just throws her into like the hearse. Do you remember that? Like,
yes, I remember that. That's a wrestler.
Yeah, that was, but that, I bet that was, I like that though, because he just threw the whole coffin there like it's like garbage.
That's funny. That makes it, he probably, he oh my God, that is wild. That's interesting. I mean, I could see it because they re-released this movie a few years after it came out when Brooke Shields got famous off of Blue Lagoon, and they gave it a new title. I forget, I didn't put it down what the new title was. So they probably threw that guy's name in there like, hey, we got this wrestler in here as well. Come and see this.
I know. So weird. And then there's another really weird credit in this movie, which I did research on. So there was one, it was at the very end of the credits. It said, and Lillian Roth. And I'm like, oh, she must be somebody kind of famous, where she plays the pathologist. So another spoiler in this movie is that Alice's father dies. He gets murdered by the killer. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where the pathologist is like, oh, this person, the medical examiner's like, they died this way, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And that was Lillian Roth. Now, Lillian Roth is a famous American singer who actually had a movie based off of her life, which was starring Susan Hayward, of all people.
What?
Like, just so bizarre. And it's a movie called I'll Cry Tomorrow. It was a 1955 movie, and she had been basically done acting, but somehow Alfred Soul got her in this movie.
That's wild. I wonder how he convinced her.
I have no idea, but it's really weird.
Yeah, I'm looking now. She was in 1933, right? And then 1976 with Alice, Sweet Alice. That, oh my God, it's like 40 years of like in between roles.
It's really weird.
Yeah,
I don't know how he got these. He got these pretty big gets.
Yeah, he did. And cool dude, I guess.
So another thing too from the movie, which I read, this was another story, and again, I don't know how true it is, but apparently Alfred Soul was a pretty big dick to Linda Miller on the set, the mother. Okay. And so much so that this production got halted at one point because, this is in quotes, Linda Miller attempted suicide on the set of the movie. Like
oh my God.
It's like tried to slash her wrist.
God.
Now, I couldn't confirm it because I was like, okay, I gotta look this up just to see. And there was another article I saw that did mention this, because I didn't want to just say this is fact. So again, take this with a huge grain of salt, but just the fact that story is out there is crazy enough.
Oh my God, that is crazy. That's like some Stanley Kubrick just being like a tyrant on set. I couldn't imagine what this man did.
That's what it was. Apparently, she tried to do it during the final the final sequence of the movie in the church. So I don't know, but apparently there are scenes where you can see a bandage on her wrist. But I looked all this stuff up after I got done watching the movie. So
gotcha.
Wow. Yeah, it's that's a definitely weird movie. But one other thing too, which I think it does kind of make sense once I read it. The other thing too I read is that Alfred Soul was heavily inspired by the movie Don't Look Now.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, which I can definitely see that inspiration.
Which that movie is about a couple dealing with the death of their dead child, mm-hmm. and there's prominent scenes where there's a character in a red raincoat, and then the killer in this movie is wearing a yellow raincoat. So it's little kind of nods to that movie.
Mm-hmm. Wow, very influential. I could see it, and look, it gave the distinctive look that I think that got us to watch this movie. Right, that yellow raincoat, that mask, it all comes together.
It looked great. It's a really good look for a killer. One last thing too, I'll say one other fact that I noticed in the movie. So this movie is not set in the current day of 1976. Yeah. And did you notice that there was posters advertising the movie Psycho?
I didn't notice that. No, that's cool.
Yeah, because it's set in 1960, in the 1960s. So there's a big Psycho poster at like a bus stop or whatever when one of the characters is there.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah, because I knew it was set in like 61 because it had like a bunch of like old, like it just looked older than the 70s. So that's a really nice touch. A lot of details went into this movie, it seems like. A lot more than I originally thought.
Yeah, and like I said, there are some really weak points to this movie. There are some like holes in it, but for the most part, like I said, I was never bored. It had a really good look. The mood was great.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I liked it. It wasn't a favorite by any means or anything. It's not one that's going to be on my all-time list, but I liked it enough that I might personally recommend it to somebody at some point.
Yeah, I think it's a recommendation for me. If you just like slasher movies and you want to dive in a little bit to the beginnings of it, I think it's worth a watch. It's just a fun movie. You know, it's not going to blow your socks off. It doesn't have like deep subtext or anything, but you know, it's a good time. I really enjoyed it. It has some really good twists and turns.
Yeah, it really does. It's a good addition to any slasher fans' viewing library.
Exactly, which I guess it has a lot of. I was looking through; it has a lot of releases. Arrow did a release recently. It looks like it has a nice cover. I'm sure it's really cleaned up and it's worth a purchase.
Yeah, the one on Tubi we saw was not the greatest. It definitely needed to be cleaned up just a tad, but it was definitely watchable. It wasn't terrible or anything.
Yeah, it was completely fine. So give it a try on Tubi, and if you like it enough, buy it.
Well said. But
wow.
I think that's everything, unless there's something else you wanted to add, Nathan.
No, that was about it for Alice, Sweet Alice.
So now that we've closed the book on Alice, Sweet Alice, Nathan, what will we be covering next time?
All right. Well, speaking of opening books, we're kind of opening a folk tale next week. It's a Russian movie called V from 1967.
That one is available on Tubi as well.
It is. Yeah, it's available right on Tubi. It's also on the 1001 Movies to Watch Before You Die, which I was surprised. The reason why I picked it. So I'm excited to watch that one. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to send us an email over at driveindoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. There are no dashes in that. It's all one word. Or if you just want to recommend us something, send us an email over there.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.